What if the only thing standing between you and the life of the 1% isn't luck, money, or connections, but the way you think? The top 1% don't just work harder, they think differently. They build self-worth without needing applause, trade comfort for long-term power, choose creation over consumption, and turn rejection into redirection. And they obsess over what they can control. And most importantly, they surround themselves with people who challenge their limits, not just cheer them on. If you've ever felt like you were made for more, but didn't know where to start, this will flip a switch in your mind you can't turn off. You know what the most dangerous belief in the world is? That your value comes after your results. That you only get to feel worthy once you've earned the money, built the brand, gotten the job, or had someone say you made it. But here's the brutal truth. That's how 99% of people live. And it's exactly why they never reach that top 1%, because they've made their value conditional. Conditional on other people's validation. Conditional on metrics they don't even control. Conditional on something outside themselves. But if you want to play in the top 1%, you have to flip that entire paradigm. The 1% doesn't wait for proof before they act. They act as proof. They don't walk into a room wondering, do I belong here? They decide before they even walk in, this room is better because I showed up. That's not arrogance, that's alignment. It's the quiet confidence of someone who has done the work, who knows who they are, and who understands that no external achievement will ever make up for a lack of internal certainty. Most people are trapped in what I call the prove it loop. Every time they get something, a compliment, a small win, a follower, a paycheck, they feel a tiny boost of worth. But then it fades. Fast. And now they need another hit. They become addicted to chasing more, not from a place of abundance, but from a place of lack. It's like trying to fill a bucket with holes in the bottom. No matter how much you pour in, it's never enough. That's the 99%. That's the trap. But the 1%, they plug the holes first. They realize I am valuable because I say so. And they don't just say it once. They build a system around it. They feed that belief every day through how they speak to themselves, through the boundaries they set, through the risks they take, through the habits they protect. They don't ask the world to approve of them. They show the world how to treat them by how they treat themselves. And here's the beautiful irony. When you operate from that place, when you show up like your value is non-negotiable, people feel it. They don't know why they're drawn to you. They just are. You become magnetic, not because you're pretending to be someone you're not, but because you've finally decided to be someone fully . I've watched this in business, in relationships, in every single arena. The person who already knows their worth doesn't hustle for scraps. They don't beg for attention. They attract opportunities instead of chasing them. They get in the room and then they get offered the head seat because people trust people who trust themselves. But you can't fake this. You can't put on confidence like a jacket and hope nobody notices the fear underneath. This isn't about fake it till you make it. This is about believe it as you build it. You have to build evidence with yourself every single day that you can trust you, that you're capable, that even if it all falls apart, you won't. And that kind of belief, that kind of grounded, unshakable confidence, it doesn't come from winning. It comes from deciding. From choosing to stop outsourcing your self-worth, from finally saying, I don't need someone else to tell me I'm good enough. I've already decided I am. And look, you don't get there in one day. This isn't a light switch. It's more like a muscle. Some days you're strong, some days you're sore. Some days you forget and go back into proving mode, seeking approval, hoping for a little pat on the back. And then you catch yourself and you remind yourself, I'm not here to impress, I'm here to express. That's how the 1% think. They play from worth, not for it. They act from power, not desperation. They serve because they can, not because they need to be seen. And when you live like that, when your value isn't on the table for negotiation, you become unstoppable. The world moves for the person who moves from self-certainty. Most people are playing a game they don't even realize they've agreed to. A game of instant results, quick dopamine hits, and the illusion that success should feel good every step of the way. That if it doesn't feel easy or gratifying right now, it's probably not meant for them. But the 1%, they play a completely different game. One rooted not in today, but in 10 years from now. They don't think in 24-hour wins. They think in decades. And That shift alone is one of the most powerful mindset changes you can make if you want to move from the 99% into the 1%. See, the average person is addicted to immediacy. They want validation now. They want the likes, the praise, the recognition immediately. They want to launch something and have it go viral overnight. They want to start the gym and see abs in a week. But the 1% understands something brutally simple. Anything worth building will demand far more of you than you expect, and it won't reward you on your timeline. You don't get to demand results just because you showed up once. Results are rented, and the rent is due every single day without applause, without celebration, and often without a sign that it's working until one day it is. You've got to fall in love with planting seeds you may not see grow for years. That's what separates people who succeed from people who just chase momentum. Momentum is sexy. Consistency is quiet, but it's in that quiet where the real compounding happens. The world celebrates the visible harvest, but ignores the invisible years spent underground, building roots. And the 1%, they live in the roots. They don't chase the glow, they become the fire that fuels it. Here's what most people don't want to hear. Growth often looks like boredom. It looks like repetition. It looks like doing the same foundational things again and again and again, long after the excitement is gone. Most people quit when the rush leaves. The 1% keep going because they're not married to how it feels. They're married to who they're becoming. They don't need every day to feel like a win. They just need every day to stack one good decision on top of another good decision on top of another until the world looks at them and calls it overnight success, not realizing it was just silent discipline in motion. Think about how most people make decisions. They say yes to what feels good now. They swipe because they're bored. They eat the cake because it's just one day. They delay starting because I'll feel more motivated tomorrow. But the 1% think differently. Their filter isn't what will feel good right now. Their filter is what choice would my future self thank me for? They don't just play to win today. They play to not lose 5 years from now. That's long-term vision. That's the difference between a short-term ego boost and long-term empire building. You see this in how they handle rejection. The average person takes a loss and makes it mean something personal. Maybe I'm not good enough. The 1% take the same loss and think, good, that taught me something. That toughened me up. That was tuition. Everything they face, heartbreak, failure, embarrassment, they alchemize into data. That's what long-term thinkers do. They remove their feelings from the driver's seat and put vision in charge. When you're driven by long-term thinking, setbacks don't derail you. They refine you. They're just feedback, not verdicts. What does that actually look like in daily life? It looks like waking up and doing what matters even when you don't want to. It looks like being okay with being misunderstood for a while, like staying low when the world wants you to be loud. Like investing in yourself when no one's watching. It's lonely, it's gritty, and it's worth it. Because while the 99% are trading hours for tiny hits of validation, the 1% are building systems, assets, and habits that outlast trends, moods, and opinions. Here's something that shifted everything for me. I stopped trying to impress people who were going nowhere. That's what long-term thinkers do. They stop playing to the cheap seats. They stop looking sideways. They stop needing to look like they're winning in every chapter. And instead, they focus on what will matter after the noise fades. That's how you build something that lasts. Not by performing, but by preparing. Not by pleasing, but by planting. Not for applause, but for impact. When you start thinking like the 1%, you realize the greatest flex is patience. It's being so obsessed with where you're going that you're willing to look like a beginner, to be underestimated, to be quiet for years. Because you know the loudest thing you'll ever do is show up with results no one saw coming. And that's when the world finally asks, how did you do it? But by then, you'll be too busy building what's next. Most people are trapped in a cycle of consumption. They scroll endlessly, watch others build, admire those who've made it, and say things like, I wish I could do that, or I just need to learn a little more before I start. But here's what separates the top 1%. They flip that script. They don't just consume, they create. And this shift, this internal decision to become a creator of value instead of just a collector of information or entertainment, is one of the most radical moves you can make for your life. Now, this doesn't mean you have to invent the next billion-dollar product or become a social media star. Creating doesn't always look like lights, camera, action. Sometimes it's as simple as sharing a perspective, building a system, crafting a solution, or showing up with value where everyone else is silent. The point is, they don't wait to be picked. They pick themselves. And this is the difference that rewires the entire game. You're not waking up asking, what should I watch today? Or who should I follow? You're waking up asking, what can I build today? What can I contribute? What can I put into the world that wasn't there before I showed up? The 1% have a bias toward creation. When they feel uncertain, they build. When they're frustrated, they make something. When they're overwhelmed, they focus on doing rather than spiraling in consumption loops. Even when they're tired, unsure, or doubting themselves, they act anyway. Because here's the real secret. Clarity doesn't come before you move. It comes because you move. That's the mistake most people make. They're waiting for the perfect idea, the perfect plan, the perfect skill set. They think success is some kind of checklist that needs to be fully ticked off before you can start. But the 1% know the checklist is created through action, through iteration, through getting in the ring, not sitting in the stands. They start before they feel ready. They launch before the logo is perfect. They speak before they've mastered their voice. They write before they've mastered the message. Because they know that mastery doesn't precede movement, it's the reward for having the courage to be messy first. That's uncomfortable. It's awkward. You'll put things into the world and they won't get noticed. You'll try and it won't land. People won't care. Some may even criticize. But that's the point. The 1% aren't playing for comfort, they're playing for growth. And growth never feels like applause in the beginning. It feels like tension, risk, uncertainty, all the things most people spend their lives avoiding. But that's the very soil where impact is grown. It's also where confidence comes from, not affirmations, not waiting for someone else to believe in you. Confidence comes from doing something hard and surviving it, from showing up when you were scared and realizing you didn't die, from failing and discovering that failure didn't define you, it refined you. Every time you choose to create instead of consume, you're making a psychological shift. You're training your brain to see opportunity where others see passivity. You're developing resilience, you're building your voice. And more than that, you're learning to trust yourself not just when things go well, but when they don't. And I'll tell you this, there's nothing more dangerous in the best way than someone who's failed and still shows up. That's someone you can't shake. That's someone who's not attached to outcome, but committed to the process. That's someone who's no longer waiting for the world to hand them a script, they're writing their own. If you look at anyone who's living at the top of their game, they weren't the most prepared when they started, they weren't the smartest, the most connected, or even the most talented. What they had and what they built was momentum, because momentum is what bridges the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And you don't get momentum from thinking about it, you get it from doing, repeatedly. And yes, you'll be tempted to pause. You'll tell yourself you need one more course, one more tutorial, one more podcast before you begin. But let me be honest, at some point, learning becomes a sophisticated form of procrastination. And while the rest of the world is busy preparing, the 1% are busy producing. So ask yourself, are you scrolling through life or are you shaping it? Are you watching someone else's story unfold or are you writing your own? Because you don't need more time. You don't need more credentials. You don't need more people to believe in you. You just need to start. And once you do, the world shifts, not because it suddenly makes space for you, but because you decided to carve it yourself. Most people hear no, and it feels like a shutdown, like something permanent, a final verdict. It stings because we've attached our identity to the outcome, to the validation, to the acceptance. We don't just hear, you're not what we're looking for, we translate it into, you're not enough. But the truth is, rejection is never really about you, not in the way you think it is. It's about timing, fit, context, and sometimes even someone else's limited lens. The 1% know that. They've trained themselves not to internalize rejection, but to interpret it, not to let it shrink them, but to let it shape them. They don't see rejection as a reflection of their worth, but as redirection towards something even more aligned, more intentional, more powerful. You've got to understand this. Rejection is feedback. That's it. It's not a full stop. It's a data point. It's intel. Most people never get past the emotional hit of rejection long enough to mine it for insight. But those who do, they see the blueprint. They get better, they refine, they adapt. And that's why they win. Think about it. When someone doesn't choose you, whether it's in business, in love, in a pitch, in a partnership, what most people do is spiral. They question everything. They lose momentum. They shrink their vision to match the wound. But the 1%, they pause and ask better questions. Not why did they want me, but what did this teach me? Or how do I make my offer so good next time it's impossible to ignore? They look at rejection like a GPS rerouting them, not a brick wall, not a dead end. That tiny mindset shift, it's everything. Because when you start to view rejection like that, not as proof of failure, but as part of the refinement process, you become unstoppable. You start seeing obstacles as custom designed training grounds for your evolution. The 1% know they're not here to avoid pain. They're here to build resilience. They're not just trying to win, they're trying to grow. And growth doesn't happen in safe, cozy rooms where everyone claps. It happens in the discomfort. It happens in the moments where you didn't get the gig, didn't get the funding, didn't get the person, and still got back up with more clarity, more hunger, and more fire than before. I've met people who've let one rejection define their entire path for a decade. One comment, one email, one investor who said no, one person who broke their heart, and it froze them. They never stepped fully back into the game after that. And you can't build a 1% life with a 99% response to adversity. You don't get to outsource your belief in yourself. The world is going to hand you hundreds of no's. You don't get to let each one dismantle you. You've got to have a response ready, one that is stronger, smarter, more strategic. Because what's often missed in these moments is this: rejection doesn't mean you're wrong for wanting what you want. It just means your path to getting it needs to be sharper. It means your messaging may need adjusting, your delivery may need refinement, your timing may be off, or maybe your environment doesn't match your ambition. That's not failure, that's feedback. And the people at the top, they collect feedback like gold. They know each rejection is just another clue, another piece of the puzzle, another redirection, pointing them closer to where they need to be. Because when you stay in the game long enough, you realize that the no that crushed you a year ago actually saved you. It protected you from a deal that would have been wrong, from a relationship that would have drained you, from a job that would have boxed you in. And the only reason you can see that now is because you didn't let that rejection end you. You let it redirect you. Here's the thing most people miss. You're not being tested on whether you can avoid rejection. You're being tested on how you respond to it. You're being measured not by how well you stay comfortable, but how fast you bounce back from the uncomfortable. If you can shift from why did this happen to me to how did this happen for me, you've already stepped into the mindset of the 1%. So the next time someone tells you no, or overlooks you, or passes on you, let it sting. That's human, but don't let it stick. Don't make it your story. Don't turn one moment of rejection into a permanent identity. Step back, zoom out, and ask yourself, what's the lesson? Where's the angle? How do I evolve so powerfully that I wouldn't even recognize the version of me that got rejected? That's how you think like the 1%. You don't flinch at rejection. You forge something greater because of it. Most people spend their days obsessed with the things they can't control. The weather, the market, what their boss thinks, what their ex is doing, what strangers say on the internet. They invest their energy into the external, trying to wrestle life into submission, instead of owning the one thing they actually can control: themselves, their habits, their mindset, their standards. That's where the 1% live, not in the fantasy of control, but in the discipline of it. The two are one-minded. They understand something most people miss their entire lives. You don't need to control everything, just the right few things that shift everything else. See, the 1% don't spend their time making excuses about the game. They learn how to play it better. While most are busy blaming the rules, they're mastering the board. If the algorithm changes, they adapt. If the economy tightens, they sharpen. If someone tells them they're not ready, they get ready. It's not that they don't feel the frustration, they just refuse to live in it. They don't wait for the winds to be perfect before they set sail. They become so skilled at rowing that they can move forward even in chaos. That shift from reaction to responsibility is one of the most powerful mindset changes there is. When you wake up in the morning and immediately hand over your peace of mind to things outside of you, you've already lost. But when you wake up and decide, I will command what I can, Suddenly, the entire day bends to you. You're no longer begging the world to cooperate. You're too focused on cooperating with your own potential. And let's be real, there's so much noise out there trying to pull you into distraction. That's by design. Social media, news, drama, gossip, envy, these are all systems built to hijack your mind and convince you that your power lies somewhere else, with someone else. But it doesn't. It lies in what you choose to do today, in how you use the next hour, in the conversations you allow, in the content you consume, in the beliefs you practice, in the questions you ask when nobody's watching. That's where the 1% separates themselves, in silence, in solitude, in self-controlled. Here's what they've figured out. Consistency beats intensity every time. Everyone wants to sprint for a week. Everyone wants the miracle diet, the shortcut strategy, the big win that changes everything. But the 1%, they've made peace with the grind. They love boring. They respect routine. They're not chasing fireworks. They're lighting slow burning fires every single day. And that's not glamorous, which is why most people ignore it. But it works because control isn't a feeling, it's a pattern. And those who build it into their lives win quietly until they don't have to be quiet anymore. Now, here's the part no one likes to hear. If your life looks chaotic, it's not just because the world is unfair. It's because your systems are chaotic. You want a better body, but your meals are unplanned and your sleep is inconsistent. You want more income, but your focus is scattered and your work ethic is reactive. You want peace of mind, but your screen time is out of control and your boundaries are paper thin. That's not bad luck. That's bad ownership. And I say that with love because I've been there. We all have. The difference is that the 1% don't stay there. They audit, they adjust, and then they act fast. Think about the energy it takes to constantly react. Every comment triggers you. Every challenge derails you. Every no feels personal. That drains your life force. That keeps you stuck. The people at the top, the real ones, the ones with substance, they don't waste that energy. They guard it. They own it. That's how they build wealth. That's how they build confidence. That's how they build relationships worth having. They're not perfect, but they're powerful because they're focused on what's theirs to change. It's their secret weapon. Internal control in an external chaos. Let me be even more direct. The 1% treat their time like treasure. They don't just give it away to everyone with a calendar invite. They're intentional because they understand that every yes is a no to something else. They track how they spend their time the same way others track how they spend their money. They don't multitask their lives into mediocrity. They go deep, not wide, because real growth, real leverage, comes from focus, not frenzy. You might think this sounds exhausting, that living like this requires some inhuman discipline. But the truth is, what's exhausting is being out of control. What's exhausting is waking up every day knowing you're capable of more, but constantly giving your power away. The 1% don't have it easier. They've just trained themselves to make hard choices before they become urgent ones. And that's a skill anyone can learn. You don't need to be rich to think this way. You need to be ready. Because at the end of the day, control isn't about domination. It's about direction. It's the quiet power of someone who knows where they're going and refuses to be shaken off course by noise, fear, or temporary setbacks. That's how the 1% move. And that's how you start moving too. Most people think success is about working hard, and it is, to a degree. But what no one tells you is that the people in the 1%, those building empires, living with real freedom, creating lives they actually enjoy waking up to, they're not just outworking everyone. They're out surrounding them. They're meticulous about who gets access to their mental real estate, the conversations they allow, the energy they tolerate, the standards they hold for themselves, and even more importantly, the standards their circle holds them to. See, support is great. We all need encouragement when we fall. But what separates those who make it from those who stay stuck is that the 1% don't just surround themselves with people who say, "You're doing great." They surround themselves with people who say, "You can do better." And I'm going to remind you of that until you believe it too. Most people want a team that makes them feel good. The 1% wants a team that makes them better. Think about this. When you tell your big, scary dream to someone, whether it's starting a business, writing a book, building wealth, becoming a speaker, what do they say? Do they nod politely, give a vague "good for you," and then change the subject to something safe? Or do they challenge you? Do they make you defend your idea, clarify your vision, show them your plan, not to tear it down, but to make sure it's built on something solid? The average person is surrounded by people who keep them comfortable. The 1% deliberately surround themselves with people who make them uncomfortable in the right way, not toxic, not judgmental, but honest, precise, direct. People who don't let them self-sabotage or slack off or disappear into distractions because it's easier than facing their potential. We've been fed this lie that the best people to have around us are the ones who always agree with us. That's not love. That's validation addiction. That's ego protection. That's being in a room where you'll never grow beyond your current ceiling because no one is willing to risk offending you by calling you higher. The 1% understand this. Your environment is more powerful than your motivation. It's easy to get hyped for a day. It's easy to watch a video, read a book, feel inspired. But your environment, that's what sets your default. That's what decides whether you stay consistent. That's what makes you either keep your promises to yourself or keep breaking them. When you're around people who don't demand much of themselves, they'll resent how much you demand from yourself. They'll mock your discipline. They'll call your ambition too much. They'll make your focus feel like obsession. But when you're around the 1%, they'll challenge your excuses. They'll push you to sharpen your thinking. They'll call you out on your blind spots, not because they don't love you, but because they do. And here's the hardest part. Sometimes upgrading your environment means outgrowing people. That doesn't mean cutting people off cold. It means being intentional. It means realizing that you can still love someone and limit their influence in your life. It means understanding that the people who got you here may not be the ones who can take you there. We all want to feel seen, heard, appreciated. But the truth is, growth doesn't always feel like that. Sometimes growth feels like tension, like being stretched, like being told something you didn't want to hear but needed to. And only people who really care about your evolution will risk that kind of discomfort. So if you want to think like the 1%, ask yourself, who do I spend the most time with? Are they playing a game that inspires me? Are they hungry for more or settling for less? Do they challenge my limitations or do they reinforce them? Are they holding me accountable to my highest standard or just keeping me company while I underachieve? Because you don't rise to the level of your goals, you rise to the level of your standards. And your standards are almost always a reflection of the people closest to you. There is no cheat code, no shortcut, no hack more powerful than being around people who expect the best from you, not just when you're on fire, but when you're off track, not just when you're winning, but when you're quiet, uncertain, and tempted to quit. The 1% understand that who you're around determines what you believe is possible. And once your beliefs change, your life follows. So protect your circle like your future depends on it, because it does.